Hey, have you ever looked at Mike Wheeler from Stranger Things and just sort of wondered, like, what the hell is wrong with that boy? Because I have a lot. So naturally, I decided to make this video in which you're all required to enjoy it and be really nice to me in the comments because this was a pain in the ass to make. What strikes me as interesting in Volume 1 of Stranger Things Season 5 is just like how little of Mike's perspective we get. And that's not new to the characters themselves. It's especially prominent with Elle in Season 4, with her saying that Mike never tells her that she loves her, and Will in Season 4 as well, saying that Mike literally never called when he was in California. But it's new to us, or at least it's newer to us as the audience, to be unaware of what he is thinking, especially considering he's a main character. So I'm sure that we'll get his thoughts in Volume 2, but that makes you wonder sort of like why the hell we're not getting his perspective earlier. I think it's a deliberate decision on the Duffers for Mike to be this sort of staticky character throughout the majority of Volume 1. Because for someone who constantly preaches the fact that, like, oh, Will, we're growing up and we have to stop playing D&D and get girlfriends and it's not my fault you don't like girls. But Mike is just as afraid of change as Will, if not more afraid of it by the finale of Season 1 with Will accepting himself as queer. Mike, his speech to Elle at the end of Season 4 is an admission of this in of itself. He says that he never told Elle that he loves her because he was afraid she would realize she no longer needed him and that day would come quicker. Now, see, what's especially interesting about this monologue is that it's a parallel, or at least a sort of response, to Will's speech in the van in episode 8 of Season 4. But in that speech, we can clearly tell that Will is using Elle as a catalyst for his own feelings. But with Mike's speech, it's so much harder to decipher who he's talking about, who he's talking to, or if he himself is even aware of who he's talking to. After all, Will says he would rather get rejection over, I believe it was quick like a Band-Aid. But Mike seems to want to prolong this pain of rejection as long as possible, so long as it means spending time with the one he loves, even if it's under a false pretense. And I personally believe that's why he didn't call Will. He was afraid of his own feelings and what it could mean for their friendship. So afraid of rejection, he decided to take the coward's way out, and because suffering would be okay if it meant still knowing Will. But that's just speculation, so let's return to the more concrete thesis here, and it's that Mike Wheeler is a stagnant little shit. I said it once, I'll say it again. I think he's scared of his feelings for Will. He's scared of his feelings, or perhaps lack thereof, for Elle, and God knows what's going on in that little brain of his. Returning to the concept, of course, of pain as a Band-Aid, Mike has this desire to keep his relationships the same as they've always been because it means he doesn't have to reflect on himself, because of course obliviousness is the best policy if you have feelings for your boy best friend or a telekinetic girl, or maybe both because you've turned them into this amalgamation of the two since you're too scared to admit you might be queer. We almost never know what the hell is going on, and it's really interesting that even when we do get his perspective, it's after he's been blamed to hell and back for his wrongdoings. We never even know really why Mike does things the way he does, and even when we do, it's so hard to analyze him because the way he responds to situations is so sporadic and can change at almost any moment. For example, just in Season 4 alone, he lashes back at Will in the Rinkomania, which, of course, anger. He tries to justify himself to 11. Then he has a heart-to-heart with Will in the van in episode 8, although it's sort of like a faux heart-to-heart. But this goes back to the idea that Mike is the heart of the party, because he's acting with emotion rather than logic, even though he may want to believe otherwise. And again, because I believe he is a being acting on raw, unfiltered emotion, we're nearly unable to analyze his actions in Volume 1 because we don't have any of that emotion. We don't hear his perspective at all. And we don't get that justification like we have in previous seasons. Now, the one time we do get a peek into Mike's feelings in this volume is during his conversation with Eleven. It's probably worth reminding everyone now that I'm a Byler believer first and foremost, but it would be ridiculous of me to analyze Mike's character and simultaneously dismiss his relationship with Eleven, because I think it is a very interesting look into both of their characters, and I'm analyzing Mike's character. So Mike tries to comfort Eleven with D&D metaphors, despite the fact that Elle has said time and time again that this isn't a campaign, it's real life. And Eleven hasn't even known ever a life outside of fighting, and she can't fathom an idea of a game about that fighting, even if it's magical or fantastical, because she is magical and fantastical. It's funny because this is Mike's attempt to console her about the future, but he's the one stuck in the past. He's using D&D metaphors from his childhood. And it's not the same exact past that Will was sort of stuck in during season 4 and other seasons, of course, but more of like a combination of Will's ideal past and when he first met Eleven, which again goes to show that Mike's feelings are unknown even to him. He doesn't know who he loves, he's confused. But it's at least clear that this isn't the comfort that Elle needs, nor is it an ending she believes in. But that's on an Elle analysis. There's not much else to look at in that exchange alone, but at the very least we can compare this conversation to Mike's talk with Will later on in the volume, where he's still using D&D metaphors, but unlike with Eleven, Will is completely on the same page as Mike for this. Will understands, and even though this isn't a Will analysis, although in retrospect I wish I had done that because Mike is a bum without an individual perspective for me to work with, it's interesting to me that we get a big focus on Will's love for Mike and not nearly as much of a focus on Eleven's love for him, whereas in season 4 it felt more like a balance between the two. So even if we're not getting Mike's standpoint right now, we can still use context clues and assume there will be a Byler breakthrough in the following volume, which is why I'm hesitant to comment too much on Mike with his romantic prospects, since we'll find out his thoughts on those very soon. But what I can comment on, of course, are these two facts, and those are that Will and Mike's relationship are clearly getting special attention from the Duffers, and we're not getting any attention on just Mike. And again, Mike using D&D metaphors goes to show that he does feel sentimental towards his past, and like I said before, him being a stagnant fuck with no perspective demonstrates how he too is unclear about his emotions, and it's not just us as the audience who are unaware of what he's thinking. The reason we don't think of Mike as the one avoiding change is because he has convinced himself that he is not avoiding it. We're falling for the facade that he set up to cope. But seeing as Will has accepted himself, I think it's time for Mike to do the same. Mike's clear lack of motive means we're bound to get it in Volume 2, and there's a reason his feelings are being kept behind bars. Mike will be forced to confront himself now that Will has powers. He can't avoid the elephant in the room it begs to be addressed. And although I believe Byler would be a more fulfilling storyline narratively for all characters involved, either way, Mike is more than likely going to have to acknowledge that his best friend loves him. And with that confession, Mike's going to have to acknowledge just who exactly it is that he loves. And I'm not sure he's ever allowed him to think about it. And isn't that kind of sad that we, the audience, don't know what he's thinking because he also doesn't know what he's thinking? Okay, that's it.